Thank you, Jared and Gary. Welcome to the Midweek Tackle. If there's one thing we've learned in finals, it is to expect the unexpected. Bailey Smith launching at photographers at training today. Zach Merrett dining with the Hawks. We'll get to all of that shortly. My name's Lauren Wood. I'm joined by Corbin Middlemas and John Ralph. Well, boys, this is finals footy, isn't it? You just don't know what's going to get thrown up.
What an amazing day today. We'll get to the Zach Merrett side of it in just a moment. And, of course, Brad Scott's appearance moments ago on AFL 360. But, Lauren, you were at GMHBA Stadium today. And, again, we're speaking about one man in Bailey Smith. What happened?
Well, I can't believe exactly what happened. Of course, he has launched a verbal tirade at News Corp photographer Alison Wine. She's a long-time servant of the Geelong Advertiser. Worked in the region for 25 years. She has just about seen it all. She would have captured 2,000 plus Geelong training sessions, but didn't know what she was in for today, and neither did any of us, expecting to be down there for a stock standard training session. So you can see here now, Bailey Smith was receiving some treatment on the bench on his back and hip region. Now, he stayed under there for a little while and then came out from undercover and made a beeline straight for Alison, who you can see there is shooting a number of rows back in the pocket, pretty stock standard for an open media session there. He then turns on his heel and he comes back for more. It was an expletive-laden tirade delivered at her job, exactly what he thought of it, John. Now, I can tell you, as we sit here right now, Bailey has not apologised for this. This is the second time he has delivered such a spray to Alison this season. Another also coming earlier this year to a female ABC reporter. So the way Alison put it to me today was that I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never quite been as rattled as I was today. She said, I was just there doing my job, which is to photograph him doing his job. She is in her workplace, John. It was completely unacceptable. Bailey has not apologised at the moment. We understand that Chief Executive of the Cats, Steve Hocking, contacted Alison just a couple of hours ago, expressed his own apology, but of course wasn't speaking for Bailey Smith. I tell you what, I did not expect that heading down to Geelong today.
So Bailey's view is that he was in a vulnerable place. He was getting treatment in a private area of the club, that he wasn't underneath the stadium in the rooms, but certainly he was in a dugout there. He was getting treatment on his hip. His view is that he asked quite politely for her to delete those photos and that he doesn't believe he has anything to apologise for. The problem is if he says, can you pass that cup, or yes or no, it has an expletive attached to it before or after. That is the Bailey Smith way. And so she clearly felt threatened. Geelong asked the media down. It was not a private place. He was sitting on the bench in plain view. We don't mind. This is great drama here. The problem for Bailey is that he needs to pull his head in. Now, I think Geelong is fully aware of it. I'm not sure whether they're prepared to enforce it. Is it the right thing for him leading into a final game next week? No, it's ridiculous. And so, Corbin, he's dragged himself into a situation that is just so needless again.
Yeah, it's a worry if he's on that much of a hair trigger, that if something goes the way that he doesn't want it to, that's the kind of reaction that we get from him. So I would be concerned if I was the Cats on the back of that. It is interesting. I think it speaks to a broader view that the Cats have towards the media. Remember in the Chris Scott episode a few weeks ago where he was very unhappy that AFL media released a bunch of vision which included or overheard some of the conversations that were being had out on the field, and Chris's response was very much, well, we just won't let him in then. And we see the way they treat their injury list is different to every other club in the competition. They're involved in late trades or late changes more than any other team in the competition. So I think Chris, and he's even given voice to this in the past, he doesn't believe in the way that the AFL have done it. The AFL are doing it largely for their media partners. And really, the AFL just turns a blind eye and a deaf ear to that. So they're not overly concerned in the way that the Cats choose to do it, which is different from every other team in the competition. But I think we've seen it shown up here in the way that one of their players feels like it's so out of the ordinary. I was at Collingwood today. People can walk in off the street and stand within 3 metres of Jordan De Goey running around. There were players that had treatment very similar to Bailey Smith today, including Nick Dacos, and we didn't get any of that kind of circus.
I think that's the thing. As you said, John, the premise of his initial argument was that was a private moment. This is an open media session that was clubs, they've invited the media in. If you want your private moment, you go down the race, you walk 30 metres down the race and you have your treatment there. Or this was actually before the session began. Have it in the rooms beforehand. So I think particularly with Bailey, as you say, it is that sort of erratic response to it. I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid if he quietly said to Alison, would you mind just not shooting me when I'm on the bench, or spoken to the media manager to say, look, just that photographer over there, I'm just not really a fan of that. But essentially what we end up with now is something that we just can't stand for. I mean, as I say, this is her workplace and no one deserves to be abused or intimidated in their workplace. You would have to be concerned if you're Geelong. This is 11 days out for the game. This isn't 11 minutes before a game.
It's erratic, but that's also his package. And so he would say, no, I want privacy. Well, he's going out with an influencer who posts shots to her 20 million followers. You know, he's tops off in all of his Cotton On gear and all of his advertisements. And so it is erratic. Now, I would think that the line between him being public enemy number one, which he has been, and the glamour boy is absolutely wafer thin. 2021, one of the great final series we've seen. And then, of course, he descended into some of his issues with the drugs. And then, of course, that didn't help. The scrutiny didn't help his mental health. So if it's only for trying to preserve or retain his mental health, as I say, pull your head in, ask nicely, drop the F-bombs for 10 seconds, and it's likely to go your way. It went the opposite of that today.
Yeah, it is going to be really interesting as well to see what happens from here. It's unclear as we sit here at the moment if there's any action that Geelong or maybe the AFL will take on this. He's got, as I say, a long list of indiscretions just this year alone. So be very interesting to see. Of course, we'll keep you up to date from that. Now, Zach Merrett, we mentioned before, dining with none other than Hawthorn coach Sam Mitchell last night. 2 years to run on a contract. It's an incredible scene. His coach, Essendon coach Brad Scott, spoke to AFL 360 a short time ago. Here's what he had to say on the matter.
It has been a challenge, but again, I understand Zach. I love Zach, and he's just so desperate for success that, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve and he goes through these moments. But our club's position is he's our captain. He's contracted for 2 years. We've adjusted his contract to reflect his performance, and we expect him to see it through.
It does. Can he be captain, though?
The compromise of course he can be captain, because the thing about no one's perfect, you know, and you know, I talk about there are a lot of players that I think are geniuses, but there are a lot of flawed geniuses too. No one's perfect, and I don't think anyone's captaincy is perfect. Anyone's coaching ability is perfect. It's a learning process, and so of course he can be captain, you know. But will it be a challenge? Based on this situation, absolutely it will be, but I've seen him overcome bigger challenges than this.
Is what Sam Mitchell's doing fair? Reasonable?
Oh, well,
Has it angered you?
Well, I think the world's changing. You know, there'd be a time and a place in which I'd be, you know, pretty disappointed, but the reality is now the gloves are off and all's fair in love and war, and that's the path they want to go down, then, you know, we'll play at that game too.
Well, the world is changing, Brad. You're not wrong there, and there's plenty of games in play. John, it was an incredibly impressive performance from the Essendon coach. Gee, he was strong.
It was really measured by Brad Scott. I've spoken to people in both camps tonight. So behind the scenes, Essendon is gutted. They're blindsided. They feel betrayed. This is not cool, according to Essendon. They know, of course, that Oscar Allen spoke to the Hawthorn coach, but he was a free agent and his club didn't really want him. This is the bloke who every year, in fact, 2 out of the last 3 years, they've given him a fat pay rise, and he keeps saying to them, I'm committed. And then he goes behind the club's back and meets with Sam Mitchell over 4 hours. Now, Merrett only just got a contract extension last year. He knew the club was on a slow build. He knew that they were not going to play finals probably this year. Now, the Merrett camp would say, pardon me, I signed up to this, but I didn't sign up to the longest rebuild of all time. I didn't sign up to us not giving a massive offer to the cultural driver and best ruckman in Sam Draper, and then saying, we won't go and get another established player, we'll go back to the draft. Now, Brad Scott has his extension through to 2027, and so he's on a different timeline to Zach Merrett, whose manager Tom Petro says he has got a thirst for success right now. Corbin, where does this one go?
It's a great question. I feel like the longer it drags out, the harder and harder it's going to be for Zach Merrett to be the captain of the footy club. So I completely believe Brad in what he's saying there, where he says, look, as of right now, he can be the captain. The longer it goes, before we hear from Zach, I think it makes it harder and harder for him to lead this team next year. My other observation of the interview, as much as he was speaking on 360 and he's talking to all of us as the viewing audience, felt like he was talking directly to Zach. Like that was the thing that I got out of it, that it felt like he came there and everything that he said was very much directed towards Zach, and they obviously have a very close relationship over a long period of time. And it was emotive, and and it was real. And certainly that was the one thing that probably struck me more than anything, that it felt like it was very pointed towards his captain in particular. And we were all listening to it, but I think Jared pushed him on the fact that had he spoken to him privately and he he said no. I felt like that was his way to communicate with Zach there in front of all of us.
And here's the problem. I will get back at Hawthorn. Well, right now, Hawthorn holds all the cards right now. So I think the expectation at Essendon was that the market was being conditioned for Zach to have a bit of a look around. Is the grass greener? No, it's probably not. I'll re-sign again. Right now, Sam Mitchell's like Jordan Belforth. He's the Wolf of Wall Street. You know, he gives you the penny dreadful stocks and he sells them for $1 million. And so if you're looking at the grass is greener, you're thinking Essendon, post-apocalyptic landscape. You're looking at Hawthorn, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. You know, rivers of beautiful chocolate, all the houses made of gold. Here's a premiership here, here's a premiership there. And so if you were Essendon right now, you'd be thinking, we're terrified, because he goes into that 4-hour meeting. He doesn't come back saying, I'm committing to the 2029 premiership. He's thinking, I want to win a premiership right now. I did a feature with Tom Barras for Friday's paper. He talked about the identical situation. Sam Mitchell in his living room halfway through last year. The person he compared him to, Ron Barassi. That was the aura. That was the way he pitched it. And he said, by the end of that meeting, I almost felt like I would be doing me and my family a disservice. So he won a premiership at West Coast. He barracked for the club. His family loved the club. He uprooted his family all the way to Hawthorn because of Sam Mitchell. Yeah. That's the power of Sam Mitchell right now.
I'm not sure Ron Barassi had a female co-pilot sort of back in the day at Melbourne and everywhere else he was. But, of course, Lyndall Mitchell is such a key to unlocking all of this, isn't it? She was key to Josh Battle, obviously making that move as well with Casey. And I know it is a little bit of a similar situation for the Merretts. I spoke to Zach earlier this season for Code Sports about his new life as a dad with baby Jude in tow as well. So there's no doubt all of that to weigh up, as well as Hawthorn, you know, in motto and in character, it continues to sell itself as the family club.
Corbin, can I ask you, would he be a hypocrite, the Essendon coach, if he kept his captain, given what he did say about Sam Draper earlier in the year? Now, we might put that quote up. Again, a free agent compared to a captain. He said, potentially it is possible to coerce a player into staying. A player in the end resents that and looks back and thinks they were either guilted into staying or coerced into staying. You're not getting the best out of that player. So we understand right now he has to say, my captain is staying. At some stage, what does he have to say? Because of what I've said before, we will give you free passage if we get the right draft pick.
I still feel like Essendon hold the cards in the sense that he's contracted there. So as much as this plays out publicly and, you know, his agency can try and make as much noise as they particularly want to try and force a trade, what have Hawthorn got to be able to satisfy the Bombers at the moment? I think they've got Carlton's pick, don't they? Which is something like pick 8, which might get pushed back. And then essentially they're going to end up with their own first rounder, which could be late, potentially in the last 4, depending on what happens this weekend in the draft hand. And then even a future pick, you would think if you're forecasting that the Hawks are going to be towards the pointy end of the season again. So I don't think the two things are similar in terms of the fact he's a free agent, and this guy's also the captain of the club. He's got 2 years to run on his contract. I can understand why that the Bombers feel like they do have some leverage in this scenario.
So let me tell you what the Essendon plan is, and it certainly doesn't involve trading out Zach Merrett. So the Dons and those close to Darcy Parish are adamant that he's very, very keen now to stay at this football club, that Ridley will stay, and that Kyle Langford's also happy to stay. So they've got picks 4, 5, 25 and 22 and 25. They'll get a pick for Sam Draper. It could be pick 6. It's probably more likely the end of first-round pick. So they would take that end of first-round pick and 22, and they'd try and trade it into a top 10 selection, maybe the Port Adelaide pick that Gold Coast has. And so they're saying, we've already got three top 10 picks, and then we've got a couple of young academy stars. We don't want more picks in a draft that we think's really good in the top 25 and then falls away. They don't want to go even younger. And so even someone saying you could have 7 picks in the top 25, it's not the draft to do that kind of mechanism in.
Yeah, well, Sam Mitchell, of course, searches for a midfielder in Zach Merrett. Melbourne continues its search for a coach. As we sat here last night at the Midweek Tackle, their B&F was being held just up the road. Now, Ralphie, give us the latest on the coach search, because it is hotting up. They want a decision next week.
That's right. So they are confident they have 3 exceptional coaching candidates. So if it is that Nathan Buckley eventually says, I'm not your coach, just like Hayden Skipworth said that yesterday, then they feel like they've got a plan A, a B and a C. That's not saying that Nathan is absolutely their plan A, even though we think it's more likely to go down that track. So the Demons were blown away by at least 3 presentations, including by James Kelly. He's only had 3 years at Essendon, 4 years at Geelong. So there is a debate, I think, in that panel, like, is he just not quite experienced enough? He hasn't coached his own team there. The interesting one was Christian Petracca, who the club has already said, well, we'll get to the coach and then we'll decide whether Christian's part of our plans. Second in the best and fairest, he was asked by the hosting Clint Stanaway how he'd rebounded and responded from, that arduous time with the King's birthday dramas, and just how he'd been able to find a way to motivate himself to get himself up. Here's his response.
Well, I get paid. Okay, that's a good point. It's my job, but it's not just my job, it's my passion. I absolutely love footy.
Well, there you go. I tell you what, it wasn't exactly overwhelming. No real talk of love for the jumper, was there, John?
Yeah, so some past players in the room, in fact, many of them didn't love that. I get paid. They wanted the jumper. They wanted to grab the Melbourne emblem. I thought he very quickly segued into the passion of that one. And I still feel like, yeah, I think there would be some of those coaching people who would come in and say, we're not winning a premiership in the next 2 years, so what can we get for Christian there? What did you make of that? Mountain and a molehill, or...?
Yeah, probably more that. Yeah, I didn't think there was a big deal, to be honest.
I don't either. All I would say is that a lot of those past players who know Christian really well, were and maybe are viewing the events of the last 12 months and him wanting to be traded and all those kind of things. So maybe they're seeing it through a harsh light.
Now, you've been all over St Kilda this as we prepare, for trade period. John, of course, Jack Silvani has made his intentions clear to join Moorabbin. What's the latest on his potential move?
So the conflict of interest is massive. It's just how you actually handle it. His dad's the list boss. He's the new star signing. Carlton's adamant it didn't recruit him, though, to try and blow up Carlton. It did it because of the analytics. It did it because they know how good a player he could be. So the club was so intent on keeping Steve out of the loop of this one, officially, that Graham Allen, the talent acquisition manager, he actually went behind the back of his manager and he just called Jack direct. He'd been wooing him for a while. I think they knew that there'd be a few stalking horses and they'd swoop on him. So according to those at the club, Steve excused himself so quickly from meetings, and here he is. I think this is late last year, with Tom Niconing, and then the plot thickens, Jack as well.
So this was actually, from round 24. That photo was actually cropped quite heavily and did the rounds on social media surrounding Tom Niconing sitting there with Graham Allen. And it's been interesting in the last few days where people went, hang on a minute, who was behind the glass right there?
Yeah, so they would say Steve wasn't a part of it. Quite clearly, we all understand that Steve must have given the green light. Is the issue here that, say, if Cal Wiki wants a fat deal, which he does, an extension on his 2-year deal, he goes into Steve Silvani and says, what do you think? Steve says, no, you've got 2 years, like it or lump it. He goes, your son is earning $100,000 more than me. He's played 140 of 200 games. I've played 155 in a row. Is that where the complication lies?
I think so, but I think that's what they sign up for, and Jack would have known that as well, that, the pros are you get to work with your old man, and that's great, and you get to reunite with Dad at the Saints, but the negative or the cons are, as part of all this, is that those accusations are going to be made from some quarters, and that's something that the Saints are going to have to try and manage. I spoke to someone that I know really well at the Saints today, and they absolutely backed up that version of events too, basically saying, look, there would be meetings being had, and Stephen would get up and walk out and basically be separate from the entire meeting when the conversation continued without him. So I can only assume now, looking back in retrospect, that there was one guy they were discussing when all that was going on, and it was Stephen's son, Jack.
Well, where the potential tension looms, it remains to be seen, as you say, at Moorabbin, but there's a lot of tension at commission level, John. I tell you what, this is a brouhaha of all time brewing at the moment under Richard Goyder. What is the latest on the fight for the commission spots?
This is getting so ugly. So people who are connected to the commission today say that the 18 clubs are behaving like sport brats, that the commission has been there for 40 years through hail and shine, and has been there and has helped these clubs through all of their dramas. So they would say they're trying to trash a democratic process, in that the clubs, they bring on the commissioners and then the commissioners decide who the boss is. Now, they would say that when they didn't get their way, they started leaking against everyone, they threw the toys out of the cot. Now, the club point of view is that they got an email last Friday saying, we can't find the right person to be elevated onto the commission, so we will do it our way. You can ratify this decision in March, when the clubs would say, it's not our fault that you couldn't find the right candidate and wanted to bring 4 onto the commission. So they were enraged. They say that only 2 of the clubs out there had any support for Peter Gordon, who was the AFL candidate. They think that, of course, Gil McLaughlin and Eddie Maguire would be brought onto the AFL commission by Peter Gordon. Richard Goyder is now trying to find a candidate who a lot of people are saying would be dubbed anyone but Brownie, anyone but Jeff Brown. It's a full-blown war. It's horrible for the entire industry. There's talk of all 18 clubs having a shadow vote to put forward a single candidate. It is ugly, and it is getting uglier by the day.
A Friday afternoon email on the first weekend of finals. It honestly baffles, doesn't it? We'll be back with plenty more news here on the Midweek Tackle. Of course, As we look towards the second weekend of the final series, no games at the MCG. There's been some high standards set at this home of football. There's been Taylor Swift, there's been Ed Sheeran notching six-figure crowds there. Could we be in for a record weekend come the prelims next weekend? We'll have that and plenty more up next on the Midweek Tackle. Welcome back to the Midweek Tackle. Corbin, John, the Suns are shining after their glorious first finals win. You've got some insight, Corbin, on their theme this season.
No one loves a theme more than Damien Hardwick. We know that, and we saw one on display last week. And again, it was perfectly executed as the Suns went there and played the role of the underdog. And the underdog that they leaned on was a team from the SEC in college football called the Vanderbilt Commodores. So they played last year against Alabama, the number one team in the nation, and Vanderbilt were like the laughing stock of the SEC. They couldn't beat anyone, and sure enough, they knocked off the number one team in it. And didn't they celebrate in Nashville? They carried the goalpost down Broadway and ended up dumping it in the river, so there was all sorts of fun. And this sort of caught my attention firstly pre-game, where there was these ropes, and given they're the Commodores, I thought, gee, is this a nautical theme or something? But I am assured by the Suns that the ropes are a separate theme, so there's multiple themes running concurrently. But there was confirmation of it post-game, as you can see there, the club tweeting out that image. That is a Vanderbilt shirt worn by Mac Andrew, and that was the theme. And like the Commodores, they pulled off the big upset. They went away from home and won handsomely.
Well, hopefully they don't go dumping anything in the Gold Coast canals if they do salute in the premiership. But, John, the guava has taken hold, hasn't it?
The Holden Commodores, I love it. What a great theme, fantastic. It's not guava, it's not rosé, it's pink, a bit like Lionel Messi, pink. So this jumper has taken the AFL by storm. So I spoke to Mark Evans today. So they sold 600 total jumpers last year, a paltry number. They are 400% up on that, and half of the 2,400 jumpers they have sold are the pink number. And so they've gone red on red, which is like Ferrari. It's not like Ronald McDonald, which was their previous jumper. They will wear it, of course, as the Clash strip. For the fourth time this year. It is going gangbusters, and it's the best branding exercise that this club has ever had. They're fearless, they're bold, and they're a young club. They can try things.
Now, take us fast forward to prelim weekend. I was lucky enough to be one of the 288,000 at the MCG last year, of course, for Tay Swift. That was an absolute juggernaut. But, gee, next weekend looms large for the MCG. This is going to be a bumper crowd across 2 days for them.
Yeah, it might have been a freebie ticket from you as well, Lauren.
No, full whack.
So we're going to smash the preliminary final record here. So Taylor Swift had 3 concerts, 288,000, so an average of 96,000. So the last time we had 2 MCG prelims was 2019. We got 77,000 and 94,000. The 2023 prelim, Collingwood and GWS, we got 97,000. So we're going to get Collingwood, maybe against GWS, maybe against a Gold Coast rather, you know, with a parochial crowd. We might have Hawthorn and Geelong as well. Imagine that. Everyone cheering for Gold Coast, apart from those Collingwood fans and the arch rivalry, the Kennett Curse.
It's going to be absolutely rocking. Now, I was at Collingwood training yesterday. We've handed the baton to you today, Corbin. You did a bit of track watch out there. What did you see?
I saw Nick Dacos, which you wouldn't have seen yesterday. So I think his older brother said he had the sniffles, which was why he missed the session yesterday. But he was out there today, looked the goods, had a little bit of work on his hip at one stage, but he got through the session. There was no Brody Myercheck and there was no Bo McCreary. So no Myercheck, no McCreary. Dan McStay, there's lots of M's here in this little soliloquy. He was in the black jumpers with the main group as a result. So given the fact that Myercheck wasn't there, other guys in the black jumpers, which is the A team, includes Roan Steele, Will Parker and Mason Cox, who of course all played in that qualifying final last week against the Crows. Jeremy Howe, along with Braden Maynard and Scott Pendlebury on light duties at different times. And the other big talking point is clearly Bobby Hill. So he was out there. I must admit, he was looking a lot leaner than what I'd seen him in the past. So I don't know if he's lost a little bit of conditioning in his time away from the club. And then the other interested onlooker was our own Eddie Betts, who of course has been doing some work as a mentor with Bobby Hill. So nice to see Eddie down there. He was trying to stay unrecognised as much as possible. So I left our man Ed alone, but had the hoodie on at one stage, but he was there supporting Bobby today at Magpies training.
All eyes on Bobby and all eyes, of course, on Luke Jackson over West. John, what's the latest on his contract?
So much speculation about whether he'd request a trade back to Melbourne. That's not happening. In his exit meeting today, he reaffirmed the fact that he's really committed to this footy club. He wants to train where he plays. So he trained as a forward all summer, and then we saw Patrick Voss emerge, and so all of a sudden he had to play as a midfielder and a ruckman from round one. He's absolutely resolute, though. So Dogs fans will not be happy because first-round pick Neil Erasmus, who just signed a 3-year deal at Freo, he was Dogs bound. He'd made the decision. He was 80% there, and then he had a discussion with his manager. Woke up the morning before the Sunday before the pre-finals bye. He just changed his mind. Bang. Contract done in a couple of days. He slept on it. West Coast very keen on Hawthorn small forward Sam Butler, who came in and kicked that key goal. They feel he can fit a forward need or even a midfield need as well. Henry Hustwaite, desperate to get out of Hawthorn. He wants a chance. He's ready. Carlton was mentioned in dispatches. There are no, but Essendon, the club that's potentially considering that. Elijah Sardis is now going to stay at Essendon as well.
Gee, a lot happening at Hawthorn and still a final to play in, if you can believe it. Of course, all roads lead to this weekend's semi-finals. We will have all of the news covering all of the action at codesports.com.au. That's it from us at the Midweek Tackle. We will see you next time. Enjoy the footy.